Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissick and Dana Gentry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissick.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Hey, Dana, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you? How is it cold there in Texas?
It's freezing. I'm going to go chase sun soon. So, but I'm super excited today, Dana, because we have a guest that spoke at our Denton Agent Leadership Council retreat the other day, and I just was blown away. And you and I get a lot from people. How do we get balance? Yep. You know, I feel like I don't have any balance. So we have the perfect guest today. So, Alisha, if you would tell everybody a little bit about your journey in real estate and who you are and kind of your story about balance.
Sure. I got in the business about 16 years ago, and I found very quickly that I could be very successful at real estate. Really quick, just to catch you up, I was homeless when I was 17 years old. My mom kind of decided that it was the end of our journey together, and she went off to do something else. My brothers were 12 and 13, and I was 17 and pregnant. So I slept in my car, kind of figured out what I needed to do to survive. And it wasn't until I found out that my brothers were sleeping in cold garages that I knew I needed to quickly grow up and figure life out. So had custody of my little brothers when I was in high school and had my baby in high school. And all I knew was I wanted to be an incredible mom and somebody successful, but I didn't know how to be the successful part yet. I just knew how to be an incredible mom. So I was invested in my son's life every single day. And then I found real estate. And as much as I knew balance in the beginning, because I didn't find success early on in my career, I realized that success became easy for me in real estate. And while success became easy, what I didn't realize is that my family was falling apart. And it took quite a while to realize. In fact, my family had to fall apart almost twice for me to understand the significance of Gary's glass ball of family. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I, realized actually in 2020 when I made $1 million as a solo agent and realized that it was the most empty I had ever felt inside. I had watched 5 years before progressively every year and didn't know how to jump in and deal with it. I watched my family fall apart. I watched my husband feel like he had a roommate and not a wife. I saw him lose himself because I was constantly putting work first and became really mean at home. My daughters were fighting. At one point, my son, who is the light of my world, and he lights up every room. He became addicted to pills, and I was so inundated and loved success that I turned a blind eye to everything else because it became, it was easy to do that, while I continued to sell 75, 80 homes. I felt important at work. I felt like people loved me. My clients made me feel special, made me feel validated. I would get awards every single year. And it was something that it was how I felt successful through awards instead of being an incredible mom and an incredible wife. And there were so many things that happened in that journey. But what I realized is that every single year was becoming harder for me to get out of this web that I had created of family way down at the bottom and my clients up at the top. And I became an alcoholic because watching my family fall apart was easier while I was drunk. I was numb constantly because I would go home and I was so mean to them that it was easier to be mean while I had a glass of wine in my hand, and then the second and the third. And I knew that I had a drinking problem, but that was one of my many problems. So drinking just became easier to deal with the other problems. I did.
I love your story. Will you tell your story? Because I think agents can relate to this. I know I remember thinking, oh, crap, I'm probably did this one day myself. But tell the story about the day you were dropping your daughter off at school. I thought that was so impactful because it's a single moment in time that we've all probably been guilty of having so much on our mind and doing something like this that it's, and you even know it in the moment, but it's too late to reverse it. Will you tell that story about when the day you dropped her off? And
Yeah. So I dropped Olivia off at school and she was about 8 years old. And I pulled up in the front of the school and I opened up the front door and said, Mom loves you. I'll see you later. And she said, will you walk me in today? And I was really frustrated. It was a Tuesday. I had my team meeting. I was running late because she couldn't find her shoes in time. And I remember looking at her and saying, no, I can't drop you off, or I can't walk you in today because Mom has to get to a team meeting and I have to run this team meeting and I have to show people the importance of showing up on time and being there. And looking at her face, she was devastated. I mean, she honestly was broken because it wasn't that one moment, Linda. It wasn't that one time that she looked at me. It was over and over and over. And it was the one moment that I saw in her face that would have taken me 2 minutes to pull over the car, walk my daughter in. And yet I showed her what it was like to have adult problems. When she goes into 4th grade and she's worried about having someone to sit by, and will the teacher call on her and make her read out loud? And, she needs to worry about her 8-year-old problems, not my problems of running a team and making her feel less important than she was. And it reminded me of the moment, and I know I said this in your ALC and it seems silly to tie these two moments together. But when I sat down on my mom's bed, when I was a junior in high school, at 5 days prior to us being kicked out, I remember asking her where we were going to go. And when she looked back at me and said, I don't know, where are you going to go? All I felt was unloved, unseen, unimportant. And the moment that I sat there and blanking on the next 5 days, I honestly don't remember packing. I really don't. When I bring myself back to that moment, because I shut the chapter on those and try not to think about those painful times. But I don't remember packing. I don't remember saying, I don't know what my mom said to me beside, I don't know, where are you going? Those next 5 days, all we had to figure out was where we were going when my brothers were 12 and 13. I mean, those are really, really young ages. And so all that came through my mind was, I will never let my children feel like this. They will never know what it's like to feel unseen, not important. And that's what I did. In that moment, that was all the feelings that came over me. Was the one thing that you have control over is the type of mom you want to be. And yet you're letting this success and this real estate take over these small moments that my children will remember, something that would have taken 5 minutes to walk her in. And as I pulled away that day, I just remember thinking, I have to figure out what I can do to change this. What's sad is how I figured out how to change it was getting drunk. Because it was easier to numb the pain than it was to take a step back and go, who do I need to be? Right? What kind of mom do I need to be? What kind of wife do I need to be? What type of person do I want to be? And more importantly, what kind of person do people think I am? And not that I put weight into what others think about me, but that is so important, because what people saw when they looked at me was somebody who had their stuff together, was somebody who had a successful marriage and kids who loved me. But they didn't see, once I walked into that house, nobody in that room felt that way about me. All of my clients love me. All of the agents here, my team leader, they all think I'm incredible. But the 4 people who mattered the most to me, they didn't even know who I was. And it was, again, easier to numb myself through alcohol because it was numb. And I didn't see, even though I saw the pain and I had the pain, it was just easier to forget about it.
It almost in some degree, because I grew up with parents that were alcoholics also, but to some degree, it was an addiction like your mom had. And it was a very similar pattern, and you could almost relate to how she got in the trap she got into, right?
100%. As I journaled, that's exactly what I thought was, this is something that I need to open my eyes to because I have a very addictive personality. I have an addictive personality when it comes to success, when it comes to anything I go hard at. So I think for me, one thing that I wasn't going hard at was my family. And it didn't dawn on me until I saw them falling apart. It didn't dawn on me until 2020 when I made $1 million, and it was the worst personal year that I had ever had. And, you know, again, I said this in your ALC, but growing up, if you would have told me as a young child who was poor and had an awful life that I would have had the potential of making $1 million, I wouldn't have believed you. And if you would have told me that I could have made $1 million and had been miserable, there's no way that I would have believed you. But it was, you know, I was completely empty inside, and my husband hated me. And I had to work, you know, in 2020 when I sat here a year ago, actually last week. And I know I said this and it brings tears to my eyes talking about it. But when I sat in my office and it was the first day that I realized that you could cry with your eyes closed, I remember praying, and I was all alone, and it was early in the morning. And all I remember saying was, God, if I sell 5 homes this year, but my marriage is the strongest it's ever been, that's my most successful year ever, because I was miserable inside. And I knew that I needed to figure out something quickly to change, because my addictive personality was going to cause a divorce and cause my kids to hate me while I was continuing to make $1 million that didn't matter.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
Well, first of all, I'm like, I have $1 million. Linda was like, we're having this girl on our podcast. I'm like, awesome. And now I'm like, holy crap, your story.
I told you it was powerful.
Oh my gosh. So thank you for sharing, first of all. And I was listening to something. I was actually listening to a church sermon yesterday, and they were talking about how to lead your marriage well. And he was saying that the most important person to lead in your life is yourself, number one. And then number 2 is your family. And he said something that hit me so hard. He said, if you can't lead I'm actually looking at my notes. He said, if you can't lead your family well, then how do you think you can lead others well? Yeah. And I was like, gosh, that's so true. So my first question is like, what was the exact moment where you were like, okay, this is like, enough's enough? Because Linda has always said, like, people will make a change when the pain is great enough. Yeah. And like, until the pain is great enough, then we want to change, and we have good intentions sometimes, but it's like most people hit them. Do you have like a time where you were like, okay, like, this is it, I'm done? And then second question to that would be, how have you kept strong? Like, do you have people in your life that are supporting you, or do you have like certain habits that you've developed? Or talk a little bit about that. So the moment for me was when I saw that my husband fell out of love with me. It's still hard for me to talk about, because we are still working every day on making sure that we put each other first. But not only did I have to make my husband fall back in love with me, I had to fall, just like you said, I had to fall back in love with myself. Yeah. Because if I didn't love myself, which I hated myself inside, I love myself outside. I made $1 million. I look, you know, I have great clothes. I have a beautiful house, but inside I was broken, and I hated the person that I had become. So the hardest thing for me was to put myself in a position to be loved again, because I knew that simultaneously I had to work on making my husband fall back in love with me, and I had to work on making myself fall back in love with me. I'll tell you guys a little bit. I have to be careful, because I am still, you know, working on things, and I just want to be careful of my relationship. But my husband and I, so I knew that, like I said, when my husband's heart, because I had just beat him up every year. I would come home making him feel less than he was. I would ask him stupid things like, so I know I'm going to retire at 40. When are you going to retire? And how are you going to retire? And how are you going to add, you know, it was things that I didn't realize that I was doing that was killing him inside. And so when I finally, and I use this analogy because it's
the only thing that I pictured every day as I was trying to get him to like me again, was the moon, and when it finally closed, it was the toughest thing that I had ever been through. I thought quitting drinking was hard. I thought saving the relationships with my kid was hard, with my children were hard. Sleeping in a car by myself at 17 years old, pregnant, driving around to parking lots that were lit up to make me feel safe so I could actually sleep a few hours. None of that compared to what I had to go through making my husband fall back in love with me. And the moment, you guys asked the moment, I don't know. I woke up one day and remember going into the kitchen and God had done something to me. And I just remember going, what am I doing? The only thing that I need to be fighting for right now is my husband. I don't need to be fighting for anything else. And so when I walked in the kitchen that morning, I looked at him and I said, what do I need to do to make you feel special today? And he was already gone. So the thing he said was, if you have to ask me that, then something's wrong. And I had just got done reading the marriage,
Love and Respect. Is it Love and Respect?
No, the 5 love language, maybe, or whatever. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. And in that book, what he didn't know is I was reading that and I was doing all of the exercises. But all of the exercises, I was getting this. It was stay away, not interested. And I would call my counselor, and the thing that I would say is, I deserve it. I absolutely deserve what my husband is putting me through. And she kept telling me, mindset shift, say it's to be expected. That's all. Not I deserve it. It's to be expected. And so every single day when my husband would look at me with disgust, and I'm sorry, that's probably TMI, but it's just what I went through. I had to just power through it. And in my mind, at least 100 times a day was, it's to be expected. And I remember sitting in 2020, sitting at the couples retreat with Jay and Wendy on Zoom. And my husband committed to it. He didn't want to do it, but he had committed to it. And it was the question of, and I have it here somewhere because I think it's a moment for me that was life-changing and I'll never forget. But it was, what's one thing you respect about your spouse, or something like that? And he said, nothing. And in that moment, you guys, the old Alisha would have said, then why are you here? Get out. But the only thing that came over me was God and the thing of, this is to be expected. And every day I would get in my car and I would cry and I would go, I don't know how to save my marriage. This is the toughest thing that I've ever done. And it took probably 7 months of me every day. And I gave myself a deadline, which I don't know if I actually would have done the deadline, but I said, you can get beat up for a year. Like you allow yourself this pain for a year because it's to be expected. This is something that is part of the healing process and is part of the journey. If we didn't hit rock bottom like that, we wouldn't have been able to have this respect for one another that we have now. So, but I will tell you that those 8 months of me telling myself that I will do whatever I needed to do to make him believe me, because my husband, we've had problems, right? I mean, I've found success in real estate for a while. And so we've had these problems before where I would go, oh my gosh, like, I know what I'm supposed to do, families first, but it never hit. And it would stick for about a few months, and I would put family first. And then all of a sudden I would go back to my own ways, my old ways. So my husband deserved months and months and months of seeing that I was a different person. He deserved that. If he forgave me in a few months, we wouldn't be where we are today, because I wouldn't have been able to go through the pain that he went through the last 10 years or 5 years. And it wouldn't have allowed me to understand that the basis of our relationship has to be respect. It's not communication, it's respect. Because if we respect each other, everything that comes out is respectful. And so you don't have to worry about communication, because you will do that if you just respect each other. But I wish that I could tell you guys the pain. I mean, I wish that I could put you in my body to see how difficult fighting for my marriage was every single day. But it was something that has made me become the person that I am, with a body filled with scars that I'm so proud of going through, because I can see the pain in other agents' faces when they talk about their husbands not understanding that we have to fly out to family reunion, or them not understanding that they have to leave dinner. And I'm that person who can pull them into a quiet room and share my journey to say, you got to listen. You know, you have to listen to those whispers, because those whispers turned into screams for me. And they were the most painful screams I've ever experienced.
You know, a couple of things that come to mind. You know, one of my turning points, and I wish I was perfect at this, but I'm not. But one of my turning points was one of our pastors was really known for Song of Solomon. His name is Tommy Nelson, and sitting through him teaching us that Song of Solomon, the part where he talked about men needing to be respected. And, you know, it's so funny because men just will beat the crap out of each other with their fist if they need to. But us women, we use our tongues. You know, we tend to demoralize and emasculate is what he would say. You know, I think that's the word, you know, the men. And that was so powerful for me, because I think sometimes we do it without even realizing that we're doing it. And so, you know, I love this, because if you save one marriage from this podcast, it's going to be worthwhile, because I just think it's pretty powerful that God bless that you hit that spot that gradually and then suddenly that jolts you awake, because some people never get awake until the cost is so high that they can't repair it. So I just appreciate that. I have a couple of questions real quick. And Dana, if you have any final questions, but what I would like to know is, because I think sometimes in real estate, we think that all of this has to, you know, we have to have all these sacrifices to be successful. How did you come to reason with the fact that, you know what, it's not either or? I can have but I'm going to just have to do things differently. So kind of talk about that, because I think a lot of people listening would probably love to put their family first and have more free time and still have a successful business. But in their mind, they think it's either or, not and.
Sure. I think that was easy for me because I had hit rock bottom, and understanding that I had made $1 million that year before. And that wasn't where I defined success. I had defined success there, but then realizing that I was going home to a broken family, that meant so much more of a success story than making $1 million or having a retirement. Because if I didn't have a husband to retire with, what was the point of saving? If I didn't have happy children to have relationships with, what was the point of working so hard? And I think that's where you have to really, you know, I ask the question to myself over and over and over, and I still journal about this, and I struggle with this question of when is enough enough? Yeah. And so I think I basically had a second chance at life. You know, you hear of these cancer patients or these patients or these people who had a car accident and they look at life different. I look at my marriage different now. And I truly don't ever think that I'll look at it a different way. So I think what people need to do is understand what is success. And I think if success to them is making so much money, they need to ask themselves at what expense. And Linda, answering the second part of your question, that was God. Because honestly, all I did was said, the most important thing to me is saving my marriage. And he allowed me to see that that business would still be here if I put my marriage first, if I put my family first. And, you know, one of the things that I'm not willing to negotiate on is my non-negotiables, and family comes first. And really quick, there was a story. We had a guest speaker the other week, and he shared a Keller Williams, actually in Texas. You guys may know them. An agent in Texas who was in an Uber, and the Uber driver was awful. She was with another Keller Williams agent. They get out, she gives him a $50 tip, and the other agent says, "What on earth did you give him a $50 tip for? He was awful." And she said, "Because I refuse to allow the actions of others to dictate my values. I am a generous person, and just because he decided to be a jerk or have a bad day, it doesn't mean that that's going to dictate who I am inside." And I think that is so beautiful, because that's us. I will never let a client dictate that they're more important than my family. If they want to call me at dinner time, I refuse to return the call until the next morning. And if we're not a good match, I'm okay with that. And I think by putting my right priorities, it's allowed business to come to me because I think I'm living life the right way. And I know that sounds silly, but I truly I believe that.
Love it. I truly do too. Absolutely. Yeah. And you didn't just do 5 deals. You did actually more than that. How many?
93.
93. There you go.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's awesome. I love that. Dana, you have any final questions or?
I was just going to say, what, like, one last piece of advice would you leave somebody who just feels like that they're out of balance? Because one of the things that we are going to talk about in an upcoming episode too is there were 3 things that realtors wanted in 2020, and the third one, which is several
2022.
Sorry, 2022. Thank you. I'm still in a COVID fog. That is real, by the way. I can't remember things. I'm like, what in the world? This is crazy. It's driving me nuts. But one of the things that they said it was like burnout and fatigue, and like their life was out of balance. So what, like, one piece of advice would you give who's maybe somebody, maybe they are very much resonating with you and your story, and they are like completely out of alignment. Maybe they're just a little bit out of balance and they're not to that point yet. But what would you tell them?
I would first ask themselves just quietly, where do you find validation? Because I think so many of us agents find validation with our clients in success and deals and awards and being part of Gary's Top 100, that you really have to ask yourself, at what expense? Because I think for me, it was just having those non-negotiables. It was understanding that it didn't matter what I produced if I didn't come home to this. So my 12-week work year last year, the number one priority, and my executive MAPS coach only coached around this, was my marriage. It was my marriage, then business, then my nonprofit that I started while my marriage was falling apart. So, those were my 3 things, but marriage was always number one. And then I made sure to do that exactly with my team, is to put their personal life first, because I knew that if they had a good personal life, that we would do whatever we needed to do here, but that came first. So for me, it was just, putting priorities and making sure that my team knew what my priorities were. And I think that brings me to the last piece, which is just having the right people on the bus. You don't realize what difference your world can be if you just have the right people. And they believed in my marriage, and they wanted my marriage to survive just as much as I did. We are out of time. I am so sorry. I talked forever.
I love it. Awesome. We could keep talking, couldn't we?
Yeah, this was great.
So many great lessons in here. And, I always remember a story of one time when Gary was on the panel with a bunch of other CEOs, and one CEO leaned over to him and said, well, the sacrifices you have to make, and, with your family and your life to get a company where our companies are at. And Gary looked at him and said, no, I'm sorry, I don't. Because Gary was the kind of guy that if you went to a meeting with him and it happened to be the day that it was lunch with John at school, guess where your lunch was with Gary that day? It was the lunch with John. So I want realtors to hear that it's not either or, but you have to want the balance, and you have to treat this family like a glass ball and fit everything else around it. And that's possible, and just be able to still do a good amount of business.
Yes. And life's short. So
Yep. All right. Every day. I love it. Alisha, how would people get a hold of you, Alisha, with the social media? What way do you?
So I'm on Instagram.
Because they need to send you referrals.
Oh, I would love it. I'm in Chico, California. I'm on Instagram at alishasimpkins.com or Alisha Simpkins, and then Facebook, just Alisha Simpkins, ALISHA SIMPKINS.
Awesome.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you. And again, I am your biggest fan. Hurry up and get your course written on how to do $1 million and still have your kids love you. Isn't that what it's going to be called?
Yep, it's how to build an empire without your kids hating you.
I love that.
It.
And I just want to say too, also, like, I feel like God has called you to share your testimony. Like, you are absolutely doing a great.
I used to be sad at how he, created my life, but I'm very aware that he built me the way that I am, so that I'm strong enough to share my story and make a difference. So I believe that. And I'm honored to be on.
It's awesome.
And Dana, she loves Salvation Army like me. They helped her family too. Everybody knows Salvation Army is my jam, because they provided Christmases and food and clothes for me also. So we have that in common. So thank you for sharing.
Okay, I hope to see you guys in person soon.
Keep doing great work.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.